Like, what do you find is the most difficult? Like, what do you think the most difficulty is in actually getting on these podcasts? Like, what do you find that people run into with that?
I think for me that I've, myself and my team, we've written a lot of copy, and I think just not being afraid to communicate and just like being willing to, put yourself out there and be real with your communication, because people are smart. Like, they're able to tell if you're being genuine or not. And the more bite that your story has to it, and the more that people are able to relate to you and identify with what you have to say, the more interested they're going to be. Also, too, with podcast hosts is they have a content calendar, right? So like they have a specific thing that they want to get across maybe for that quarter, right? And it's my job as the publicist and my job as the person representing the guest to do that research and make sure that what the guest is saying and what the podcast host wants are in alignment with each other. So that way, they can both get as much value out of the content as possible. Does that make sense?
Yeah. When you say bites, like what do you mean by bite? Like if something is biting, what does that mean?
So by bite, I mean like, okay, I don't mean like sensational.
Yeah, of course. But like, what do you, when you say like, it's like they got to bite at it and like kind of like,
it grabs your attention.
Oh, I see.
You know what I mean? Like, for example, I'm representing somebody. His name is James Arthur Ray, and he has an incredible story. And, a lot of people already know who he is. And honestly, his name itself has star power to it. Right. And not to mention like how his story is so harrowing, and his wife too, Bersaba. So I will communicate like, have you ever like, and you really want to talk to the person from across the street. I know that, through email, it's kind of just words and just blah, blah. But like, it's like, I'm a person on the other side. I'm trying to reach with my communication to that other relay point so that they can understand what I'm saying. Right. So I might talk to them and say, have you ever been betrayed? Has this ever happened to you? Like frame it so that I can actually talk to the person despite the barrier of a screen.
Yeah.
Do you know what I mean? And the more real that your communication is, like people want that. People are starving for real connection and community.
Yeah.
So
totally. And I find it interesting too is like, people who come on the podcast, like I always try to find something that's interesting about I want to have some interest in the person.
Sure.
Because I feel like if there's no interest in what they want to talk about, it's like, I can't really communicate to the person. So I think it's what you mentioned was you have to communicate fully your thing, but also like give a story almost like, like you have a backstory, like, who is it? I remember, her, I have a close friend who I'm trying to still get on the podcast is Zoltan.
Oh my gosh.
And
Zoltan. Yeah, he's great.
Who's got like literally, he's got a lot of people like he's just done so much between his humanitarian work and just this work that he's done. And it's like, he literally went from being homeless to like being like a multi-million-dollar.
Yeah. But like, that's a great example. So somebody like Zoltan, like Zoltan will have his episode and he's going to be able to represent himself, he'll have the opportunity, but just from hearing him speak from my own viewpoint, this is something that like he inspires others to be better.
Right.
Right. And, it's possible, like for me, what I find the most interesting in a guest is like, is it possible to like, is this something that I can relate to myself? Like, wow, you went from like the absolute rock bottom to like the absolute top in one lifetime. Like that's incredible. That sounds like something that is desirable, actionable, and in alignment with what I'm interested in knowing.
Right.
You know what I mean? So,
right. It's just a fascinating thing. Like just, especially for me, like seeing someone who goes from nothing to something is like a big deal.
Yeah.
And I find that also too, like in a store, like when you're pitching to people, like you're trying to get their attention first. Right.
Yeah, totally. Yeah. I mean, it's also important too, like if you're just a podcast host or a guest to survey, who is the audience that you are interested in reaching? Have you asked them what it is that they're interested in learning about? What problems are they running into? It's actually quite simple. Like, I feel like in the world of entrepreneurship, there's no guideline really. And it's kind of just like nobody teaches you how to be an entrepreneur. You kind of go from being an employee to being like, okay, now nobody is like an entrepreneur. Like nobody is pushing me to do anything.